media freedom in times of disruption. So here's some more information about the topic.
Disruptive developments, calling for radical innovations. Digitization has sparked dynamic shifts that are changing our everyday lives. Do you want to understand how and why? Let's get to it.
Don't you dare speak out. Can digitization create more opportunities for establishing media freedom in times of disruption?
And I'm happy to be joined by three guests who are gonna discuss with me. The first one is Irene Khan. She is the UN Rapporteur on Promotion of Freedom of Expression. Ms. Khan, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Very happy to have you with us. The second person on my panel is Masih Alinejad. She is joining us from the US. She is a journalist, an author, and also a human rights activist.
Thank you so much. Yes, I'm an Iranian journalist living in exile. It's a pleasure for me being with you.
A pleasure to have you with us. And I am also glad to be joined by Erol Önderoğlu. He is the representative of Reporters Without Borders in Turkey. A warm welcome to you as well.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to talk about media freedom, freedom of expression, especially in times of disruption, because disruption and innovation, that is our theme of the Global Media Forum this year. So I want to start with you, Ms. Khan. As the UN Special Rapporteur on freedom of expression, you recently said that journalists around the world are facing life danger, even when they are outside war zones. So paint a picture for us. What kinds of threats are we talking about here?
Well, we are talking about the biggest threat, the threat to life. About 1,500 journalists have died in the last 20 years. This year, since January until now, about 21 journalists have been killed. So the numbers are very high. Sorry, 21 journalists were killed last year, and a large number, about 6 or 8, have been killed this year. So they've been killed with impunity because only 12% of cases are ever prosecuted. Here you have, among the two other guests that you have, is Erol in Turkey, whose case I have taken up with the Turkish government, who has been what I would call judicially harassed, facing charges for basically doing his job. So you have killings with impunity, sexual harassment of women journalists, weaponizing the rule of law to harass journalists, intimidate them. There have been a spate of laws over the last year during the COVID pandemic of fake news laws that governments have introduced, primarily not to address disinformation and misinformation, but actually to attack those who wish to criticize, including independent journalists who are bringing up issues about the way in which governments are handling the pandemic. So, and most dangerously of all, we see a delegitimization of independent media when even in liberal democracies, we see political figures, political leaders attacking journalists, undermining them, and it's like a dog whistle. That then gives a license to others, non-democratic forces who would want to attack and undermine media freedom. And then, of course, all the challenges of digital technology, which, of course, is having enormous impact on the media ecology.
Yes, and we will talk, Ms. Khan, we'll talk about that a bit later, because you have really mentioned so many issues that the journalists are facing. And oftentimes, as you said, it is difficult for them to find any kind of support, because if you are being oppressed by the government and by the judiciary, then where do you turn to in that case? Now, Masih, I want to bring you into the conversation. You already mentioned that you are an Iranian journalist based in the US. And let's take a look at what is happening in Iran, because the situation for journalists there is pretty dire. According to the Press Freedom Index, Iran is on position 174 out of 180 countries when it comes to freedom of press. And it is not just the Iranian journalists who are in the country who are finding it even more difficult to work independently as journalists. It is also journalists like you who are working outside of the country. So how are you particularly feeling the pressure from the Iranian regime?
Oh my God, I really don't know how to start. To be honest, media freedom is a luxury that we don't have in Iran, but we have plenty of disruption. All we have is disruption. In fact, journalists are under pressure constantly from the government to stick to talking points set out for them. If you expose corruption, if you expose assassination, killings, you will end up in jail for sure. Right now that I'm talking to you, 21 journalists are in prison, and we don't have any statistic that how many citizen journalists are in prison. For example, 50 women's rights activists are in jail, and 10 of them are just peacefully protesting against compulsory hijab by using their camera. Can you believe that? Like using their camera, filming themselves, peacefully protesting, saying that I don't want to be forced to wear hijab. And those are in prison. And many other citizen journalists for just simply exposing killings in the streets or people getting beaten up and ordinary people just filming them. Those are in prison and we don't have any statistics about it. So the threats have not stopped for people and journalists right now. I have to say that I myself have been a journalist for almost 2 decades. When I was a parliamentary journalist, when I exposed the corruption, the Iranian government kicked me out from Iranian parliament. If I was in, let's say, Germany, definitely I would have received an award. But just simply for doing my job, I got kicked out from Iranian parliament and then from my homeland, Iran. And the threat didn't stop. When I launched a campaign against compulsory hijab, guess what happened? Iranian state television said that I was raped by 3 men, and that was a lie. So they tried to discredit me in this way. And I want to give you another example. Last November, there was a peaceful protest which took place in more than 100 cities. The government shut down the internet. They killed more than 1,500 people. They arrested more than 7,000 people. And what happened? They filtered all the social media, but our officials were present on social media. Some journalists, pro-regime journalists outside Iran were using social media, helping the regime and denying all the killings, changing all the narrative. That actually breaks the heart of a lot of activists within the society. I want to give you another example.
Masih, I'll have to stop you there. Masih, I'll have to stop you there because...
Just one example. The Revolutionary Guards shut down an airplane, and then the officials in Iran denied it for 3 days. Because of international pressure, they admitted that, yes, we shut down the airplane and we killed more than 176 innocent passengers.
So what I'm hearing you say there is that it is really difficult to be a journalist in Iran, even if you're just a citizen journalist. And the numbers that you gave us there, they are really shocking. But we also have pretty shocking numbers from Turkey, where you are from, Erol. So I want to bring you into the conversation. So for a number of years, Turkey used to be the country with the highest number of jailed journalists. Last year, it was actually 274, but that is worldwide. And there's still lots of journalists that are jailed in Turkey or are being charged for no apparent reason. So tell us, what does a journalist really have to do in Turkey to find themselves behind bars or even being taken to court?
Well, thank you very much for making possible this nice event. For Turkey, I should say that Crackdown, the specificity of the crackdown has changed over the last 5 years. Turkey was truly the biggest jailer of journalists in the past. In the recent years, they prefer to submit journalists systematically under judiciary control. So we still have dozens of journalists behind bar, but plus many journalists have their prison in their mind. So on the self-censorship, they have to operate. So dozens of journalists were sentenced for offending the president. And most of the time, the sentence, yes, are provided, given with these judiciary control measures. Unfortunately, many law aspects are weaponized against journalists, and all major issues, like military operation toward Syria or Libya, or the issue of Syrian refugees, or corruption, political clientelism, all kind of wrongdoings issues are subject to are a reason for judiciary to crack down on critical journalists. So the most this government like is a kind of patriotic journalism, which means that you are agree in advance not to criticize the government, not to question any kind of wrongdoings, and if it's so journalists are submit to arbitrary measures like to be deprived of press card, or to be deprived of public advertising, and some sentence given by High Audiovisual Board against TV and radios.
So some journalists are
under
also...
this government. Under this government, so arbitrariness became the rule for those who don't want to see their profession liquidated.
So that means that some independent journalists would rather censor themselves and be more careful so that they do not get into trouble with the regime and also with the judiciary. So, Ms. Khan, you work for the UN. You are the rapporteur on freedom of expression. What is your role exactly? How are you working together or helping all these journalists that find themselves in trouble in their own countries?
I'm an independent expert appointed by the UN Human Rights Council. I report to the Human Rights Council and to the General Assembly, and it's my job to monitor what's happening in countries around the world on freedom of expression and opinion, report to the Council and General Assembly, but also pick up complaints and enter into dialogue with governments, advise them on their laws, and if necessary, speak out. I'm independent in the sense that I do not get a salary from the UN. The UN has no ability to influence my decisions. By speaking out, I hope I can advocate and champion the cause of journalists who, during the COVID-19 crisis, have proven that they are essential workers. You know, people want clean government and clean water. And they're going to get both, they're more likely to get both if there is media freedom, because media freedom is the pillar for democracy as well as development. And it's my job to try to raise these cases, to pressure governments, and to get them to follow the principles of international humanitarian law and human rights law.
Yes, so you work together with governments and you advise them. You said that on laws that are friendly towards journalists. What reaction do you get from governments? Where is it often difficult for them to agree with you?
Well, for many governments, it's very difficult to recognize the responsibility that they have. And many governments, of course, do not like to be criticized, do not see the relevance of these laws. International law is very clear. Under international law, freedom of expression is not absolute. Governments can restrict freedom of expression, but on very clear grounds, and those restrictions have to be construed very narrowly. For example, to protect someone's rights or reputation, or national security, or public order, or public health. But governments are adopting very vague and broad laws under which they interpret national security very broadly. Take the case of Turkey. The counter-terrorism laws there are so broad that even normal, what we would call normal support for journalistic work falls under counterterrorism laws, and they're using those laws to lock up many journalists who dare to criticize the government, and that has a chilling effect on others. That's the most dangerous thing. You may count 200 or so journalists in prison, but there are several hundreds outside who are unable to say what they want to say. And that's how governments basically shut up any criticism.
Now, we are looking at the role of innovation as well in advancing media freedom. And many journalists who especially live in repressive countries have turned in the past to the internet to really get their message across. They have seen that as a space where they can express their views freely. So I want to go back to you, Masih. You, in 2014, you really got on our radar. We reported about you numerous times because back then you had launched a Facebook page called My Stealthy Freedom, and there you were fighting for women's rights in Iran. So tell us back then, how were you using social media to really get a message across and to also advance human rights and also freedom of expression?
To be honest, I have to say that when I started that campaign, I didn't expect it's going to go viral and it's going to be now one of the most prominent civil disobedience movement within the society. Now, my Stealthy Freedom have like 1 million followers on Facebook, 5 million followers on Instagram. And that is why the government really hates us, the women of Iran, because they know that we are fighting against one of the main pillar of a gender apartheid regime. Compulsory hijab is not just a small piece of cloth. But I have to tell you that the government they have guns and bullets. They have prison. They put women's rights activists from our campaign in prison. They arrested my own brother. They sentenced him to 8 years prison to keep me silent. They actually kidnapped one of the journalists called Ruhollah Zam. They kidnapped him from Paris to Iraq, and they took him to Iran. They executed him. And the same day, they sent me death threats saying that we are going to kidnap you as well. That shows you that the government, who has guns and bullets, prison and power, all the media, is scared of the power of social media. Basically, our weapon is social media. To be honest, sometimes I get annoyed and disappointed when I see that the German officials, the politicians from European Parliament, they go to Iran and they totally ignore asking the simple question about those women who are in prison just because of removing their hijab. Instead, the female politicians from your country, from Germany, they obey compulsory hijab. I get disappointed when I see that the tech companies totally keep silent when they see that the supreme leader of the Islamic Republic, banned Iranian people from accessing social media, but they are on social media and they have verified account. To me, they have to be kicked out. Twitter banned President Trump, but how come dictators are on social media? So for us right now, social media, yes, it is an important tool to break the censorship, but on the other hand, the government are present on social media they arrest citizens for just expressing themselves on media. They call us prostitutes just because of being our true self on social media, but they're using the same tool to mislead the rest of the world about what's going on in Iran. That's why
Masih, I find it
Yes,
very,
I
very
call on
impressive.
all.
Yes, I find it very impressive that you, despite all the issues that you're going through, despite the threats and really your family being dragged into this, you're still keeping up the fight. So what you're also doing, you are working for Voice of America, the American foreign broadcaster, and you are often reporting about issues that are happening in Iran, and you actually do get some material from the people who are on the ground in Iran. So what is the best and the safest way for them really to get in touch with you without having to fear that they are also gonna be followed by the Iranian regime?
That's a very good question. I'm a freelancer working for VOA and many other media broadcasting outside Iran, which my dream is to be in my own country. And I have to say that this is the decision from Iranian people inside Iran because they don't have any media, so they send videos to me and many other journalists who live outside Iran. And I want to tell you something. The head of the Revolutionary Court made a new law. He went on TV, one of the clerics, the head of the Revolutionary Court, said, if anyone sends videos to Masih Alinejad, will be charged up to 10 years prison. Can you believe that? And the same day when he announced that, I was bombarded by videos from women even who wear hijab. One of the brave ones is Fatemeh Sepehri, who wore hijab. She said in front of her camera saying that if sending videos to Masih Alinejad is a crime, count me as a criminal because I want to say no to forced hijab and no to Islamic Republic. So I want to tell you that people in Iran, they know the risk, but they know that the freedom is not free and they have to pay for freedom. So that is why they are in frontline. They're using their camera to send videos to media outside Iran, including me. The government called me like hostile government, the Islamic Republic. And they harassed my family just because they want to break me. And I always tell myself that I have only two options: to be miserable, to feel miserable, to make my own oppressors feel miserable. Like many young protesters in Iran, I choose the second one, to make my own oppressors feel miserable and keep doing my job.
Thank you very much, Masih, and thank you for that optimism as well. Now, Erol, I want to bring you back into the conversation. So we're talking about how the women in Iran are using social media to really say that even if you are blocking some of the sites, even if you're making it difficult for journalists to work here, then we have other means of spreading our message and really making sure that we are getting the information that we need. Now, in Turkey, what we have been observing is that more and more independent media is being taken over by the government or by people who are friendly towards the government, like, for example, some business owners. So has the presence of the internet and all these means that we have online to either create a blog or to create some kind of website or social media site, has that helped increase media plurality in Turkey?
Yes, I think that new online portal, journalism portal, and also the impact of social media in Turkey is occupying an important role in Turkish society, where some 90% of national mainstream media are controlled directly or indirectly by government circle. So not only critical media, but also online journalist circle, alternative or critical one, are very important. Of course, more than 30 million Turkish people are having a Facebook account. More than 15 million Turkish people are getting a Twitter account. And particularly after the 2019 local election, alternative media get more important. Together with foreign media, Turkish sections, they became a new source for Turkish people who were not seen by mainstream media outlets. So it became an alternative, but of course, needless to say that the government has also made preparation at the legal level to crack down on social media if necessary, and they have amended high audiovisual legislation to make possible such a control. But for now, I think that this has refreshed public debate, and people question more on the fact to reach independent and reliable information. That's very important because we, as NGOs, as human rights defenders, we are using all these tools widen our audience and to create more impact in among local journalists, among international media representatives, and toward public institutions. So it is a huge contribution for all of us. But I should also say that the crackdown in Turkey has reached another dimension. So it is also targeting journalists in exile. You all know the case of Can Dündar and the Interpol Red Notice launched against him. We are all monitoring in Istanbul the case of our colleagues Deniz Yücel and many other journalists who are in trouble in Turkey. So we are trying to maintain this solidarity to resist against this crackdown, but I think Turkey will not be getting rid of this repressive system as long as we don't have a government involved in reconciling the nation, because we are all affected by this political polarization, including the media circle and including the NGO circle. Yeah.
So, Ms. Khan, we have discussed here on how journalists are being cracked down upon even when they're posting items online. Is that something that you're seeing an increase of?
Oh, incredibly. I mean, you just have to think about what happened here in Europe. Think about Roman Prakasevic and how his plane was diverted and he was taken 2 minutes close to land and arrested and is still in detention, probably will face the death penalty. Of course, social media has opened opportunities, but social media has also are now being seen, online journalism is being seen as a threat by governments. What we really need is much more solidarity in the international community among governments to stand up and speak out for media freedom. It's a matter of political will at the end. International law principles are very clear. The importance of independent, free, diverse, pluralistic media is also very clear. We've seen it very recently during the pandemic, the importance of information. There is right now a crisis, a public crisis of people's trust in information. We talk about social media, but also at the same time, social media also has a dark side to it. And journalists, independent journalists, professional journalism is the best fact checker that we have. And yet, that is the one that is under attack from governments. So I think the international community has to do much, much more than what they're doing so far to uphold media freedom.
Thank you. And I want to give the final word to Masih now. So we're here at the Global Media Forum. It is hosted by DW, which is Germany's international broadcaster. You work, among other things, for the American international broadcaster. So what would you say is the best way for us international broadcasters to really reach our audiences in Iran to make sure that they also get press freedom, or they at least get independent journalism that is created here in other countries?
I strongly believe that through social media, you can get the true voice and you can see the true face of Iranian people. To be honest, I always say that in the map, we have only like one country, but in reality, we have 2 countries, Iran and the Islamic Republic. If you want to get the news from the real Iran, you have to actually ignore all those officials who are banning their own people, all those dictators who order the massacre of their own population, deny freedom of speech for their own citizens, jail journalists, and issue threats against dissidents. But they have verified the account and they welcome on CNN, on social, on different media in the West, in America, in Germany. All we want is this: give the platform to those who do not have any voice within the society, but they are brave enough to share the truth with you. For me, I honestly want to use the opportunity now, call on, I'm very pleased that I'm part of the panel that Chancellor Merkel was the main speaker. I want to call on German government, support those people who are in jail just because of simply spread the truth. And don't just legitimize a regime who kill its own people and use the social media to change their narrative. Freedom of speech is under threat from dictators. And we need the big tech companies as well to show solidarity with those fighting for freedom of speech. For a start, I think let's just kick out Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, from Twitter.
Thank you very much, Masih. That is a very strong appeal there towards the end of our session today. I want to thank you, Masih, and I want to thank my other panelists as well, Ms. Khan, together with Erol, who was joining us from Turkey.